The preparation period was 10 days. He used all of them. The practice arena was open from the 1st hour to the 9th, and during the tournament preparation period, the open hours were crowded in a way they usually weren't. Students from both tracks working through their techniques, calibrating their patterns, doing the specific kind of training that was different from the training you did when there was nothing immediately at stake. There was an edge to the practice sessions that the ordinary weekly sessions didn't have. He noted this and used it. An arena full of students with slightly elevated stakes and slightly lowered self-consciousness was an arena where people showed you more than they intended to. He trained for 1 hour each morning at the profile consistent level footwork, the specific physical conditioning that a general track student with his official capability would plausibly work through in preparation, visible effort. Then he sat in the observation area above the practice floor and spent the remaining time watching. He observed Walcroft on the 2nd day. Hayden Walcroft was the Crown Prince faction's senior student anchor, which meant Kael had been observing him at a distance since September. The combat observation was different from the social observation, where social behavior showed you what someone wanted people to believe about them. Combat behavior showed you what their body knew. The body didn't have the same social editing capacity. Walcroft trained with 2 partners in rotation, both second-year Aura track students in the Crown Princess faction who were clearly practicing at below their own capability to serve as appropriate opponents for his session. He had Silver Aura, fully consolidated, not newly achieved. The signature was settled in the way that suggested he had been Silver for at least a year and had worked with it rather than simply accumulated it. His technique was clean and conservative. He didn't overextend. He didn't commit to combinations that left him exposed for longer than necessary. His spatial awareness was good for someone without a space affinity. He tracked his training partners through peripheral vision and body angle reading rather than anything more refined. His panic response, the moment when a training partner got inside his guard unexpectedly, was a slight over-rotation to the right before the correction. Brief. Maybe half a second. He corrected immediately and consistently, which meant he knew about it and had been working on it. A student who had been working on a specific flaw for long enough that the flaw was almost corrected, but not quite, was more predictable than a student who hadn't worked on it at all, because you knew exactly where the flaw lived and approximately how long it took to trigger. He noted this in memory. He wrote nothing. The 2nd day's observation gave him Walcroft at approximately 85 complete. He observed Nira Fell on the 4th day. She was a 3rd-year Aura track student, Silver, who had won the previous year's tournament in her bracket and was generally understood to be the strongest returning student below the advanced track. She trained with focused intensity and without partners, solo drills, the specific Aura output patterns of someone who had their own working style so well established that practicing it with an opponent present was less useful than refining the form alone. Her technique was not Walcroft's conservatism. She attacked with early commitment. The first strike of any combination was her real strike, launched at the fastest timing available. The subsequent strikes in any combination were cover for the first one having succeeded or not. This was aggressive and effective and had a specific vulnerability to opponents who could read the first strike's launch before it arrived and position themselves accordingly. He could do this. He was not going to let her know he could do this. What she showed him in solo drills was the full technical range of her attacks, which was more useful than watching her in a matched session where she would have revealed only what she needed to. In solo drills, she ran every pattern she had. He cataloged 7 distinct combination types, identified 3 he hadn't seen her use in the earlier weeks of tournament prep, and determined that her highest output technique had a consistent setup requirement. She needed 2 seconds of uninterrupted stable footing before the launch. He filed this. If he found himself across from her in the bracket, the defensive response was clear. He also found himself genuinely interested in watching her train. The commitment she brought to each drill, the sense that she was performing the technique at full precision each time regardless of the absence of an audience, was the kind of thing that was interesting on its own terms. He noted this separately from the tactical assessment, in the same register he had used for the study group, something that was what it was, regardless of what use it was. By the end of the 7th day, he had observation profiles on 19 students he considered serious competitors. The profiles were held in memory, organized by the 3 variables that determined combat outcomes in the Academy's format: technical capability, aura density, and pattern recognition under pressure. He had ranked all 19 on all 3 variables and built a predictive model for any given matchup. The model's accuracy limit was approximately 15. There were things he could not assess without direct contact, specifically, the changes that happened under genuine high-pressure combat as opposed to preparation period training. Some students performed significantly above their training profile under match conditions. Others dropped significantly below it. Without a large historical dataset on each individual, this variability was the primary source of prediction error. He accepted 85 accuracy as the working figure. The 2 students he could not build predictive models for with any confidence were Mira, who had attended no practice sessions in the arena during the preparation period, which was itself information, and Damien Cross. On the 8th day, he wrote his tournament planning revision in Cypher. The original 3 columns, wins, losses, cannot afford early, required updating based on the 10 days of observation. The wins column expanded. He had identified 4 specific early bracket opponents against whom his compensatory footwork persona could deliver wins that read as plausible. 2 general track, 2 lower-tier aura track who happened to have weaker pattern recognition than their aura density alone would suggest. The losses column was more precise. Walcroft was winnable at full capability, which made him a loss only on social cost grounds. Mirafel was winnable at 60 to 70, which made her the most interesting problem on the list. The cannot afford early column was now cannot afford at all in current bracket. Mira, capability unknown, no data, and Damien, close range spatial reading risk unchanged. Seraphine remained bracket separated. He ran the seed calculation. His additional strategic loss in the enrollment period had worked as planned. He was seated in the lower portion of his bracket, which would give him general track and lower-tier aura track opposition through the preliminary rounds. The semi-finals seeding would depend on the bracket's performance outcomes and was less predictable, but the path through the preliminary rounds was clean. He closed the notebook. On the 9th day, in his pre-dawn session in the general use arena, before anyone else was present, he ran at his actual capability for 35 minutes. Gareth's full footwork program, at the speed it was designed to be run at, with a spatial awareness that let him use the whole arena simultaneously rather than the portion of it that was visible. It was not frustration that drove this. It was maintenance. A skill in use degraded. He used it in the pre-dawn sessions and left it in the pre-dawn sessions. He went back to the residential tower and prepared for the day's preparation period training at the approved pace. The tournament began the following morning. The administrative inquiry response arrived on the 6th day of the preparation period. A standard Academy administrative envelope, delivered through the internal correspondence system to his residential tower postbox. He opened it at the desk in his room before the first hour, before the practice arena opened. The response was 3 paragraphs of formal administrative language confirming that the external observer in question, the one he had inquired about under the academic transparency provision, was registered as an authorized representative of the Church of Light's Academic Outreach Division. The observer's name was listed in the 2nd paragraph, Elder Chorus Neve, credentialed by the Academic Outreach Division's Accreditation Board. Authorized presence at the Academy for the duration of the current academic year as part of the division's student support program. He read the name twice. Then he wrote it in cipher. He had the name now. Elder Chorus Neve. He filed it in the Damien Cross operational record and turned his attention to what it told him about the Academic Outreach Division of the Church of Light. The Academic Outreach Division was one of the Church's 5 internal divisions. He had read a basic summary of it in the founding century while working through the charter analysis. The division operated talent finding and scholarship programs, primarily at academies and institutional schools throughout the kingdom. It was publicly and genuinely the most benign-seeming arm of the church. It provided real scholarships to real students, some of whom had no connection to the covenant or the order at all. Its cover function, if any part of it served a cover function, was extremely well constructed. The name Neve was not in his Var Aldrin correspondence intelligence. It was new. He would need more sources to cross-reference it. He noted this as a priority after the tournament concluded. He watched Damien train on the 7th day. The practice arena's morning session had its usual tournament week configuration, most students with any combat standing, working through their preparation routines. Damien trained in the arena's southern section, which was slightly removed from the main floor's congested preparation area. He had the space to himself by informal social arrangement. Other students gave him room without being asked, which was a function of his combination of reputation and genuine warmth. He was well-liked and also clearly out of most people's league. Both things were true simultaneously. Elder Neve was at the observation bench above the southern section, the same position he occupied at every Damien training session. He was writing in the blue-gray notebook. Kael positioned himself in the observation area 3 tiers above Neve's bench, at an angle that gave him sight lines to both the practice floor and the observer. He was holding his own notebook with actual preparation notes in it, which was a true description of how the morning would be spent. He looked at the floor when Neve looked at the floor and at his notebook when Neve looked at his notebook. Damien ran his training patterns. He was impressive to watch. Not simply because of the aura density, the secondary structure's additional output was obvious to Kael in the passive spatial field registration, less obvious to anyone else, but because of how he used it. He trained with the specific quality of someone who had worked to deserve their capability. The training was intentional, disciplined, systematically constructed. He ran each pattern to the same standard each time, didn't accept an imprecise execution. Returned to the beginning of a sequence when it broke down rather than continuing from the error point. This was the behavior of someone who understood that what you practiced in training was what you had in the actual match. Someone had built a false tower around this foundation. The foundation was real. He watched Neve as much as he watched Damien. The notebook filled at a pace that varied by what was happening on the floor. When Damien was running the standard calibration patterns, the opening routines that all students with his level of aura development would use to warm up the core and establish baseline output, Neve wrote at a moderate pace. When Damien shifted to the more complex combinations, Neve's writing accelerated. When a specific technique produced an unusual result, once, a combination that generated more output than expected, once, a moment when Damien's form wavered and the output dropped slightly, Neve stopped writing entirely and watched. These pauses lasted 4 to 8 seconds. Then the deliberate note. Calibration. Not documentation. Neve was reading Damien's aura output in real time and adjusting the secondary structure's parameters in response. The notes were the parameters. But how? The spatial field between the observation bench and the practice floor was 60 feet minimum. Secondary aura structures required close-range maintenance. The initial installation, from what Kael had determined in the CH58 analysis, required physical contact or something very close to it. Ongoing maintenance could potentially work at greater range if the transmission medium was already established. If the secondary structure had an embedded receiver component that was attuned to Neve's specific aura signature, the calibration signal could be delivered at 60 feet through that attunement. This was not standard aura engineering. This was either very old knowledge or very specialized knowledge. He filed the observation under the Neve entry in his cipher. Transmission range confirmed at minimum 60 feet. Requires established attunement, receiver component in secondary structure. Remove Neve's structure destabilizes within approximately 40 minutes, based on CH58 maintenance interval. But, does the structure destabilize cleanly, or does destabilization cause harm to Damien's primary core? He added, unknown. Do not act on the structure until this is answered. Midway through Damien's session, Neve spoke. It was brief, perhaps 8 words, at a volume not audible from Kael's position. Damien didn't look up from the pattern he was running. He nodded slightly, with the quality of someone receiving a coaching note from a trainer they trusted. 3 seconds later, the output on a technique that had been running at slightly below Damien's previous level came back up to baseline. Not a dramatic shift. The kind of adjustment that would read to a casual observer as Damien naturally finding his rhythm after a warming-up period. Kael watched this happen and added 1 entry to the Neve file. Real-time calibration confirmed at minimum 60-foot range. Communication appears verbal, but adjustment appears aura direct. Mechanism. Verbal prompt triggers Damien's trained response. He believes he's receiving coaching, while actual adjustment is delivered via attunement channel concurrently. Double mechanism. One visible, one invisible. Elegant. He also noted separately, in the margin of the cipher page that he used for observations, he was uncertain how to categorize that watching someone be managed this well, from 60 feet away, in a room full of people who saw only a talented young man training hard, was an experience that was difficult to name accurately. Not pity. Something adjacent to it that was also a specific kind of anger at how well the thing was hidden. He went to the preparation floor for his own session when Damien's concluded. He trained at the approved pace. He kept his notes. The morning session ran until the 3rd hour. Then he went to the library, because the last 3 days before the tournament began were also the last 3 days to advance any research that would be interrupted by tournament week, and his church organizational structure research was not complete. He found the connection in the academy library on the afternoon of the 8th day of preparation week. He had been looking for it in the wrong place. His initial frame had been organizational. He was searching for a member of the Eternal Covenant's upper tier who was currently embedded in the academy as a faculty member. He had been looking for someone whose external academic position matched the 7-year requirement, whose institutional record showed the right kind of access interests, and whose personal history connected to moments he had already identified as potential covenant operations. This was the correct framework. The problem was he had been searching for this person in the general faculty records, looking for someone whose institutional history was unusual in ways he could detect. He had been looking at effect rather than cause. The cause was the academic outreach division. The connection arrived as a consequence of already knowing Elder Chorus Neve's name. He had Neve's name as of this morning. He had the name of Neve's institutional home, the Academic Outreach Division of the Church of Light. He had, in his research notes from the CH64 analysis, a brief summary of the division structure that he had taken from the founding century's footnotes. The summary was thin, 2 sentences about the division's talent-finding function, a note that it had expanded its program significantly approximately 20 years ago. What he had not looked for, because he had not had a reason to look, was who currently led the Academic Outreach Division. He looked now. The general stacks had 4 texts on the Church of Light's current organizational structure. The most recent was 8 years old, which was a liability, but the division's leadership structure was unlikely to have changed significantly in 8 years, given the institutional stability the church demonstrated. He found the relevant section on the second pass through the table of contents of the 3rd text. High Priest of the Academic Outreach Division, Master Heinrich Velen. Academic credentials listed. Prior institutional positions listed. Current additional role, Professor of Theological History and Ethics at the Valdres Royal Academy, appointed 12 years ago. He read this twice. 12 years at the Academy. The 7-year minimum for Shepherd Tier Covenant membership. Velen had been at the Academy for 12 years and had led the Academic Outreach Division, the organization that produced the scholarship programs, the talent-finding programs, and Elder Neve himself for the last 8 of those years. He held the book at the right reading angle and did not show any particular expression. He went to the restricted section. He had standing access through Professor Varen's sponsorship, which covered historical administrative materials. He used it to access the Academy's faculty appointment records, public administrative documents, available in the restricted section because of their age and archival status, and pulled 3 filing periods, 12 years ago. Velen's Academy appointment, 3 years ago. The administrative restructuring he had already flagged as a potential covenant access operation, and 9 years ago, a midpoint check. Velen's initial appointment 12 years ago, standard. He held credentials from a reputable ecclesiastical academy, had spent 7 years as a church lecturer in the capital's seminary district, was appointed to the academy's faculty by the dean at the time with the support of the church's academic outreach division. The appointment moved through the standard administrative process. 9 years ago, nothing unusual about Velen's academy position. He had received a promotion to senior faculty status, which was routine. 3 years ago, the administrative restructuring. He found the relevant committee record. The restructuring had changed 3 things: the student record cross-referencing system, the external observer credentialing process, and the faculty advisory committee's composition for the Aura Track's advanced curriculum. The committee that had proposed the restructuring was chaired by senior faculty advisor Heinrich Wellen. He filed this with the quality of someone placing the final piece in something that had been incomplete. He now had 3 independent references connecting Wellen to Covenant beneficial operations. The first, the administrative restructuring 3 years ago, which Wellen had chaired and which had changed both the record-keeping system, Covenant access interest administrative records, and the external observer credentialing process. Covenant access interest controlling who has authorized observer status and what their access covers. Neve was an authorized external observer whose credential had been processed through the new post-restructuring system. The second, the Academic Outreach Division's expansion 20 years ago, which coincided with 2 of the Noble Council's political shifts that Var Aldrin's intelligence had flagged as order beneficial. Wellen had not yet been leading the division at that point, but the expansion's architects had included his predecessor, and the expansion's programs had been the template for the current operation with Damien. The third, Wellen's position at the Academy itself. The Charter's requirement for Shepherd Tier members to hold relevant institutional positions for 7 or more years. 12 years at the Academy, in a role that gave him access to student records, faculty advisory processes, the curriculum structure, and the external observer credentialing system. This was not incidental to the Covenant's interests at the Academy. This was the operational core of it. He wrote in cipher, Academy Embedded Member Identified, Master Heinrich Wellen. Position, Professor of Theological History and Ethics, Senior Faculty Advisor. Secondary position, High Priest, Church of Light Academic Outreach Division. Time and position, 12 years, meets Shepherd minimum 5. Connection to Neve, Institutional Superior. Connection to Damien Cross, through Neve, indirect but chain is documented. Connection to 3 charter-aligned access operations, confirmed. Assessment, Shepherd Tier or above. Primary function at Academy, access, student records, faculty committee, observer credentialing, and candidate identification. Damien Cross known current candidate operation. Others, unknown number. He paused. Then he added, do not act on this. Current resources are insufficient for any action. Current objective, observe, document, understand what the candidate identification function looks like over time. Wellen does not know he has been identified. This is the only advantage currently available. Maintain it. He closed the notebook. He had not attended any of Wellen's lectures. He had been aware of Wellen's existence as a professor. The course listings showed theological history and ethics as an Aura Track optional elective and a second-year general track requirement, but had not, in the first term, had occasion to interact with him. He had now identified Wellen as the most significant threat on Academy grounds and the most significant intelligence target he had yet located. He would attend the course next term. Not now. Now he had a tournament in 3 days. He returned the faculty records to the archivist, who noted the return in the access log without looking up from her reading. He walked to the practice arena for the afternoon's preparation session, ran through the footwork routines at the approved pace for 40 minutes, and watched 3 mid-tier students work through their tournament preparation patterns in the western section with the attention that he brought to all observation and that looked, from the outside, like ordinary spectator interest in a shared institutional space. He was thinking about Wellen the entire time. Not with urgency. With the specific quality of attention that a long-term problem received when a major variable had just been confirmed. The attention that recalibrated the timeline and the priority sequence, and then filed the update and returned to the present situation. Because the present situation was what was immediately actionable and the long-term problem was not, yet. The tournament began in 3 days. He went to dinner. He sat at the study group's table. Renner was theorizing about the tournament brackets seeding formula, which he had identified a mathematical inconsistency in, and was explaining to Sova with characteristic enthusiasm. Lorne was eating with the focused efficiency of someone who had a training session scheduled in an hour. Cass had procured a specific variety of headache root that she was distributing to anyone who seemed likely to need it in the next 4 days. Kael ate dinner. He listened to Renner's seeding theory, which was correct in its identification of the inconsistency and incorrect about its consequences, and he told Renner this, and Renner wrote the correction down and thanked him. And the table continued in the ordinary manner of people who shared a space and had become, without planning it, the people they shared it with. 3 days. He went to sleep at the appropriate hour. The tournament's preliminary rounds took 3 days. The format was single elimination with 2 matches per student per day in the early brackets. First rounds in the morning, second rounds in the afternoon, with the bracket reassigned overnight. By the end of the 3 days, the field of enrolled students, 94 across both tracks in the standard bracket, would have reduced to 16, who would enter the quarterfinal bracket. The advanced track had its own parallel schedule. He had 94 tournament participants mapped. He knew every enrolled student's combat registry standing, their preparation period training patterns, and their approximate position on his predictive model's 3-variable matrix. He had a preferred opponent for each of the first 3 rounds and a plan for how each match should end. The bracket, of course, produced what the bracket produced. His first match was against Sela Dorn. She was a first-year general track student from a commoner background, enrolled on the combined academic and community merit program, who had placed 31st in the combat registry through the natural accumulation of 3 matches rather than strategic sequencing. She trained regularly, which was in her credit, and had an earnest approach to combat that produced consistent results against opponents at her level. She was not at his level by any measure of the word. The match went 8 exchanges. He was significantly more challenged by the calibration than by the match itself. Against an opponent this far below his actual capability, the risk was not losing, the risk was winning in a way that looked wrong. A win that was too easy produced the same suspicion as a win that was implausibly good. It told observers that you were not doing what it looked like you were doing. He let her land 2 hits. The first was genuine. He had positioned himself for the opening of the 8th exchange without fully accounting for her variation on the entry pattern, which was slightly different from her training session version. This was the adaptation that matched athletes did and solo drill observations didn't capture. The second he allowed. He read it arriving and stepped into the range rather than out of it, absorbing a strike at the shoulder that moved him back 2 steps in a way that looked like the natural consequence of being outpaced. He won on the 3rd point of the exchange with a footwork sequence that positioned him at her right flank before her follow-through recovered. The crowd registered it as general track scholarship student, mediocre tournament record, managed to advance first round through footwork. His heat's presiding senior student noted the outcome without comment in the bracket record. Sela Dorn came off the floor with the specific expression of someone who had done everything she knew how to do and found it wasn't enough, which it hadn't been, but not for the reasons she thought. He inclined his head to her. She nodded back. She had competed seriously and was not diminished for losing. He went to the preparation room and ran through the calibration notes. Second hit allowance. Executed well. First hit, genuine miss, correctable with 2 more days of observation data on match condition adaptation patterns. He filed the observation under transition to match conditions produces pattern variations of 5 to 12 from training. Adjust for this in subsequent rounds. The afternoon match was against Tren Alwick. Alwick was a second-year Aura track student in the lower tier of the registry, which was where his seed had placed him. He had a slightly higher aura density than Kael's official profile, which was accurate. Most Aura track second years had higher aura density than a declared defective general track first year. The match's expected outcome, for anyone watching the bracket, was that Alwick would win through attrition, outlasting the footwork-reliant general track student with superior aura output. Kael won in 11 exchanges. The footwork was the only visible tool, and it ran at the level he had perfected in the CH65 dual calibration, positions that were accurate rather than obvious, transitions that looked like intelligent improvisation rather than spatial pre-reading, a reaction speed that read as attentiveness rather than advantage. He took 1 genuine hit. Alwick's first combination had a better leading entry than his training data had shown, the same match condition variation he had noted in the morning, and 2 allowed hits that distributed the visible damage appropriately. The win read as Intelligent maneuvering by someone who had studied aura track patterns carefully and was exploiting the specific type of mid-level opponent who committed early. Mild upset. The presiding student noted it as general track, compensatory technique, advancing through tactics. This was the notation he wanted. Day 2 moved faster. He had 2 more rounds. The morning match produced the expected result. An aura track first year who was in the bracket by virtue of enrollment rather than competition standing, defeated in 6 exchanges through the standard footwork sequence. The afternoon match was Vel Ander. He recognized Ander from the challenge that had been declined in the corridor in November. Ander's expression when the bracket posted their matchup had the specific quality of someone who had been waiting for a corrected outcome, not anger exactly. Something closer to the certainty that this time the result would be different from what it should have been. Kael accepted the challenge that the bracket had assigned and arrived at the arena's east entry at the correct time. The match was 12 exchanges and was, by the end of it, not quite what either of them had expected. Ander was better than the practice arena had shown. The tournament's elevated conditions had produced the upward variation he had noted and calculated for. Ander's aura density ran hotter in match conditions than in training, which increased his output by approximately 15 on his standard combinations and made his preferred entry pattern faster than the preparation period data had indicated. The first 3 exchanges were genuine. He allowed himself to look, briefly, like someone who was finding this harder than the early bracket should have been. Then he found the footing pattern that Ander's elevated conditions entry relied on a slight forward weight transfer before the launch that was more pronounced at higher output and began using it. 7 exchanges later, Ander's combination was not landing because the position it was aimed at had been vacated approximately half a second before the strike arrived. The win was clean. It was the first win in the tournament that he had not made visibly effortful. The crowd's response was slightly different. Not impressed, he was still a general track first year, but slightly recalibrated. The presiding student's notation, tactical adaptation, upper bracket potential unclear. He noted this. Upper bracket potential unclear was not the notation he had planned for Day 2, Round 2. It was the notation for Day 3, quarterfinals approach. He was running 1 round ahead of the intended social impression. He adjusted his plan for the Day 3 rounds accordingly. That evening he wrote a letter to Aldrich. The Cypher courier channel was slower than the Academy's internal correspondence system and faster than standard post. Letters sent from the Capital's Guild node reached the barony in approximately 4 days. He wrote through the surface layer first, the version that described the Academy's year-end tournament in the language of a first-year student's straightforward account, and then encoded the second layer beneath it, which contained the actual information. Tournament status, the 3-round record and its social effect, the Velen identification, and the progress on the Damien Cross analysis. He also wrote a version of the tournament matches that Gareth would recognize. Gareth had spent 3 years teaching him combat the way Gareth had learned it, as a problem of information and positioning. What does your opponent know about where you'll be in 2 seconds? Make that information wrong. Every match Kael had run in the tournament so far had been that sentence in execution. The footwork that the Academy's observers read as clever improvisation was Gareth's footwork program, run at the fraction of its capability that was safe to show. The positioning that read as intelligent maneuvering was spatial pre-reading that Gareth had taught him to do long before the space affinity had made it something more than trained intuition. He didn't write this directly in the letter. He described the matches in enough detail that Gareth, who understood what Kael had learned, would read it accurately. Then he sealed the letter and carried it to the Capital Guild node Dropbox in the Merchant Ring, which took 40 minutes on foot and was worth it. He used the time thinking about the quarterfinals. Day 3. 2 more rounds. By the end of Day 3, if the seeding held, he would be in the quarterfinals bracket. He needed to manage the Day 3 rounds such that his advancement was not implausible, but also not so decisive that it raised the questions that upper bracket potential unclear notation was beginning to suggest. He walked back to the Academy through the December dark, with the cold that came off the river pressing through the coat's collar gap, and thought about where each footwork transition needed to land for each of his likely Day 3 opponents. He went to sleep. The quarterfinals were in 2 days. The advanced track bracket ran parallel to the standard bracket. Their matches were scheduled in the tournament's secondary arena, a space with better sight lines than the main arena, better acoustic management, and an audience that tended towards smaller and more attentive. The advanced track students were older and further along. Their matches were, by tournament design, more technically sophisticated. The audience that attended them was self-selected for interest in seeing something worth watching. He attended every one of Seraphine's matches. This was not suspicious. Several students from the standard bracket attended the advanced track matches between their own rounds, partly for entertainment and partly for the tactical education value. He was among a dozen people from his bracket who were regularly present in the advanced arena's observation section. He chose his position in the observation section for consistent angle. Third row, end seat on the east side of the arena, which gave him sight lines to the full field without having to turn his head significantly. He brought his notebook. He wrote in it. The notes were about Seraphine. Her first match was against a third-year advanced track student named Corvin Helst, who had a silver aura and a generally respected tournament history. He had won his previous year's bracket in the quarterfinals, which was a reasonable benchmark. She defeated him in 94 seconds. He counted. The match's opening was unremarkable. Standard combat initiation exchange, both combatants assessing range and timing. Helst used his first combination to establish his preferred working distance. She accepted his preferred working distance without apparent objection. Then the light changed. It was not dramatic. It was not a beam or a flash or any of the visual language that light magic was often described within the texts. It was more precise than that. It was more like a shift in the geometry of the space between them. She was standing at a specific position, and the space from that position to a specific point on his right side became briefly different. And the light magic she was holding coalesced at the point that had become different, already there before the motion of getting it there was visible. Helst moved. The light moved with him. Not following him, anticipating the position his movement would arrive at. She hit him 3 times in 12 seconds. None of the 3 hits were direct blows in the conventional sense. They were structural disruptions, strikes to the aura field at points where aura integrity was architecturally thinner. The specific exploitation of aura structure that required knowing in advance where you were going to land the strike, and then landing it there without the visible intermediate step of getting it there. The third disruption collapsed Helst's field. He conceded. She stepped back. The light settled. She looked at the presiding student with the neutral attention she brought to everything. The crowd was quiet for a moment, and then it wasn't. He wrote in his notebook, Voss Radiance. Light-space combination. Primary mechanism. Spatial displacement of the strike's arrival point. She establishes the geometry of the space between her and the target before the target can track the geometry's establishment. The strike doesn't travel from her to the target in visible time. It arrives because she has already determined where it arrives, and the space element removes the visible intermediate distance. Light magic follows the spatial prepositioning. 2 affinities functioning as one integrated technique. The limitation requires stable prepositioning of herself. She doesn't move during the technique's active phase. She establishes geometry, executes, reestablishes. Between the re-establishment intervals there is a brief moment where the spatial prepositioning has been released and the next hasn't been established. Duration. Unclear from this match. Helst didn't reach it. He underlined the last sentence. Need more match data to determine the interval's duration and characteristics. She had 3 more matches before the quarterfinals. He attended all 3. The second match was more complex. A student who had a defensive technique that worked against the Voss Radiance's initial positioning. Seraphine adjusted within the first 15 seconds, shifted her spatial prepositioning approach, and found a geometry the defensive technique didn't account for. Match time, 1 minute and 47 seconds. He noted, adaptive. The technical basis is flexible, not pattern fixed. She isn't running the same sequence against every opponent. She is running the same principle against every opponent and generating new sequences in real time. The third and fourth matches were over in under 90 seconds each. Different opponents, different spatial configurations, same result. By the fourth match, The crowd in the advanced arena had stopped treating her outcomes as surprises and started treating them as something else, not routine, because what she was doing was not routine, more like appointment. You arrived to see what you had come to see, and you saw it, and the specific quality of it was what made you come back. He sat in the third row, east side, and wrote notes, and watched what the crowd was watching. The crowd was watching beauty. He understood this response without sharing it, which was not the same as finding it inaccurate. There was a specific aesthetic quality to watching a technique executed with the absolute minimum necessary, means no flourish, no waste, the exact action required and nothing adjacent to it. The crowd registered this as beauty because beauty was what people named the quality of precise to the point of apparent simplicity execution when it produced outcomes that seemed disproportionate to the visible effort. She walked into the field. She stood at a specific position. The match ended. The gap between the apparent effort and the outcome was the gap that the crowd was calling beautiful, and they were calling it that because they could not see the structural work that was closing it. He wrote in his notebook, "The crowd sees beauty. The observation is accurate but incomplete. The structure underneath the beauty is the interesting part." He paused. Then he wrote, "The structure is also, considered on its own terms, interesting." He left this entry without revision. Between her third and fourth preliminary matches, there was a 3-hour break in the advanced bracket. He used it for his own second round of the day. He ran his second day preliminary match with the appropriate calibration. He won. He went to the preparation room and noted 2 observation updates from the match, and then returned to the advanced arena observation section for the 4th preliminary before the preparation room had fully cleared. He was at his third row east seat when she walked onto the field for her 4th match. She did not look at the observation section. She looked at her opponent, at the field, at the presiding student. Her spatial awareness, which he could read from his passive spatial sense registration at 50 feet, covered the whole arena in the way that a light space practitioner's spatial awareness naturally did, not actively scanned, but continuously registered. She would have him in her peripheral coverage. He kept his expression at the standard neutral of an observer who was watching a match. The match ended in 71 seconds. He wrote the time in his notebook and then wrote the interval he had identified between the second and third spatial prepositioning, approximately 0.6 seconds. Brief. Long enough to be a vulnerability if you could read it was coming and had already prepared your entry for it. He underlined the figure. 0.6 seconds. At approximately 70 of his actual spatial displacement speed, he could cover 4 meters in 0.6 seconds. He closed the notebook. The crowd was making the sound it made after her matches, appreciative, slightly awed, and already discussing among themselves whether she would win the tournament, which she would, which everyone in the arena already knew she would. He went to check on the quarterfinals bracket posting. His name was in it. He was the only general track student in the quarterfinals. The quarterfinals bracket was posted at the 7th hour of the 3rd day. He read it. His opponent was Nira Fel. He had expected this was possible. Fel's preliminary performance had been consistent with the tournament record that had placed her at the top of the standard bracket's historical standings and had planned for it, provisionally. In the revision he had written on the 8th day of preparation week. She was winnable at 60 to 70 capability. He had not planned to win. He spent the 45 minutes before the quarterfinals reviewing his planning. The original plan, advance to quarterfinals, demonstrate some surprising capability in the quarters to make the advancement plausible, then lose in a manner consistent with being outclassed by a silver aura student with genuine tournament experience. The arc of the performance, unexpectedly capable but ultimately limited by the core deficiency. The problem, he had already demonstrated surprising capability in the Day 2 second round against Ander, which had produced the upper bracket potential unclear notation. He was now in the quarterfinals as the only general track student remaining and the only first year remaining in the standard bracket. Every match from this point was being watched more closely than the preliminary rounds. Whatever he showed against Fel would be the data point the Academy's social assessment used to revise its understanding of what he was. He could not continue to show mediocre performance. The quarterfinals required a real match. The question was, how much real? He made the decision in the preparation room, 5 minutes before the presiding student called the competitors to the field. Nerafel trained for combat the way he had observed in the preparation week, committed first strikes, early launch, combinations designed to make the opponent react to the first strike and find the follow-up already in motion. She had silver aura, fully developed and working. She had 3 years of serious tournament experience. She looked at him across the field with the specific expression of someone who was taking the results seriously because she was a serious competitor, and the result was what she had come here for, not with dismissal, which was the expression he had been expecting, and she initiated with her first combination at exactly the speed and angle he had catalogued and predicted. He was not there. Not through the footwork sequence. Through something else. A half step at the moment of the combination's launch that was faster than the footwork register, that read, to anyone watching, as the body-level response of someone who had seen the combination coming before it launched. Spatial instinct, in the language the practice arena used for students who read opponents better than their aura level explained. He was at her right flank before the combination resolved. He hit her once, cleanly, on the aura structure's right side integration point that he had identified in the preparation period observation. Not a disabling strike. He was not calibrating at the level required for that, but a genuine contact strike that registered in the scoring and registered in her body as the specific surprise of contact arriving before you had finished tracking where it might come from. She recalibrated. 2 seconds. She launched the second combination. He was not there for the second combination either. The match ran for 9 exchanges, and in 7 of the 9, he was in a position that the combination had not been aimed at. In the other 2, he took the hits because the calibration required that the outcome not be implausible. The hits were taken correctly, the second combination's second strike, and the fourth combination's entry. These connected cleanly and moved him back with appropriate visible effect. He won on the 5th exchange of the second half of the match, when Phil committed to her highest output technique, the one with the 2-second stable footing requirement, and he stepped inside its launch radius instead of outside it, where the technique's spatial requirements made it significantly less effective. The match ended. The crowd was quiet for approximately 4 seconds. Not the silence of having seen something unsatisfying, the silence after Tolt's match against him had been that silence. This was a different quality, the silence of an audience that had been watching with one expectation and had found themselves at the end of something that had not matched it. Then it was not quiet. He heard, as he bowed to Nerafel, who returned the bow with the direct composure of someone who had lost a serious match to someone they had not fully assessed, a specific conversation beginning in the 3rd row of the observation section. He did not look toward it. He heard, "Where did that come from?" Someone answered, "Did you see how he was reading her?" He knew where the combination was going. His aura is supposed to be defective. His aura is, and then the preparation room door closed and the conversation continued without him. He sat in the preparation room for 6 minutes. He had allowed himself one genuine performance. He had used approximately 57 of his actual capability and had won a match against a silver aura 3rd-year student in the Academy's year-end tournament quarterfinals, visibly through spatial instinct and physical speed that his official profile did not account for. He ran the assessment. What they saw, a general track first year with a declared defective core who had somehow developed combat capability his aura profile didn't explain. The most available explanations were extensive pre-enrollment physical training, plausible for a frontier barony background, exceptional pattern recognition developed through study, consistent with his academic profile, and the specific kind of spatial instinct that occasionally developed in students with unusual core structures, which instructor Faratha's lecture had covered in a different context. Fractured cores sometimes produced atypical lateral developments. None of the available explanations required that his core was anything other than what it appeared to be. His aura is defective, and then the door had closed. The crowd's explanatory frame was intact. What had shifted was the weight of the capability within that frame. He had moved from Category 3 to Category 2. Visible but not watched, to filed as known quantity with a known quantity now requiring revision. This was the correct transition point for this move in the tournament. He had calculated that the quarterfinals were where this transition needed to happen, late enough that the preliminary record looked consistent with someone unexpectedly developing under pressure, early enough that the semifinal and final rounds would read as the natural ceiling of what that development could produce. What he had not fully calculated was the specific audience composition of the quarterfinals. He had known both tracks watched the quarterfinals. He had not run a complete map of who specifically would be in the observation section when this match happened. He thought about who had been in the observation section. He thought about Seraphine, whose own bracket had produced a 1.5-hour break at the exact time his quarterfinal match was scheduled. He did not know if she had been there. He would find out from the crowd's composition retrospectively if he could. If not, he would find out from the outcome of the interactions he was about to have. He stood, arranged his equipment, and went to check the semifinals bracket. It was posted by the time he reached the board. He read it. He read it again. He stood at the board for a moment with a specific quality of stillness that was not the stillness of having processed something, but the stillness of still processing it. The semifinals bracket paired him with Seraphine Voss. He had not arranged this. The bracket drew from the 4 quarterfinal winners' positions through a randomized assignment that the presiding committee ran in the administrative office after the quarterfinals concluded. He had watched the quarterfinals from the standard bracket side and had not been in the administrative office. He had not been anywhere near the administrative office. If he had been able to arrange the bracket's draw, he would have arranged it differently. He stood at the board and processed this for approximately 30 seconds. Then he walked back to his residential tower room, sat at the desk, opened his cipher notebook, and began planning. The problem had 2 layers. The first layer was the match itself. He had been planning a semifinal loss for weeks. He had planned it against an Aura Track upper-tier student, his estimated likely semifinal opponent before the draw, whose capabilities he knew and whose match he had already modeled. The plan loss was specific. Visible effort, some unexpected competence that built on the quarterfinal performance, then clean defeat by superior aura development. An outcome that maintained his cover and added one more data point to the developing picture of unusually capable general track student, ceiling limited by the core deficiency. Seraphine was not the opponent he had modeled. He knew more about her combat capability than he knew about any other student at the academy. He had 4 matches of direct observation with detailed notes. He knew the Voss Radiance's spatial prepositioning mechanism, the 0.6-second interval between positioning cycles, the specific structural vulnerabilities of her aura output at the reestablishment phase, and 3 variants of her approach that she had used against different defensive styles. The problem was that this knowledge was itself data. If he used it in the match, if he avoided her strikes in the specific ways that his observation had identified as effective, the avoidance pattern would be readable. A student who consistently evaded the Voss Radiance in the exact windows where evasion was possible was a student who had studied the Voss Radiance with unusual technical precision and had a spatial displacement capability that went beyond what exceptional spatial instinct explained. The second layer was what she would see. She had space as a secondary affinity. She was the best combat student in the academy. She had been observing him since September with the specific quality of attention she brought to things she had categorized as interesting. If he fought at 70 capability, which was what the match required if it was going to last long enough to be worth watching and give him the plausible loss he needed, she would see enough to raise questions. He had already decided at the quarterfinals that she might have been in the observation section for his match against Fel. Now he had the specific problem that the next match would be against her, directly, and the spatial displacement he had used against Fel at 57, which had registered as exceptional spatial instinct to the standard observers, would be visible to a space affinity practitioner at a different level of resolution. She would likely see what it was. He sat with this for a long time. The window he was writing to at his desk faced the academy's inner courtyard. December had settled the courtyard into the specific stillness of a space that was usually full of people and had been emptied by cold and evening. The courtyard lamps were lit and made small circles of gold on the stone. And beyond the academy wall, the capital was doing what it always did, which was everything, simultaneously, in every direction. He was 14 years old and 138 years old, depending on how you counted, and he was planning a fight with someone he had been watching since September and had not, in any of the calculations he had made, planned to fight this year. He thought about what she would see. She would see spatial displacement used to avoid the Voss Radiance during the match. At 70, the displacement would be clean enough and fast enough that she would recognize the space affinity's use. She would not be certain immediately. She would need to distinguish between spatial instinct trained to an exceptional level and undeclared space affinity, and that distinction was not available at visual observation range. But she was smart, and she had space herself, and by the end of the match she would have a question she had not had before. He could fight at 50 and keep the spatial displacement from being legible. At 50, the match would be over in 3 exchanges and would look like what the audience expected. Brave first-year Frontier student overwhelmed by Silver Aura Advanced Track Champion. A useful result. A clean result. He would lose in 3 exchanges, and she would not see the space magic. He wrote this option in the cipher notebook and then looked at it for a moment. The issue was not strategic. The match at 50 would produce an outcome that maintained every cover element intact. It was the correct strategic choice. What it was not, a match worth watching. Not from her perspective and not, he found, from his. He had been calibrating his performance for 3 months with the goal of remaining invisible. He had achieved invisible at 50. The match at 50 against Seraphine Voss, the best combat student in the academy, with a technique he had spent 3 days studying from the observation section, was invisible, achieving its own purpose so completely that the purpose felt, considered on its own terms, like waste. He sat with this second observation for a while. Then he wrote in the notebook, 70. Spatial displacement at the second Voss Radiance, visible, and she will likely read it. This is the acceptable risk. The alternative is not acceptable. He did not examine why the alternative was not acceptable. He went to the study group's common room. Because there was no match that evening and no preparation session, and there was an hour before the dinner period, and he had been sitting in a room thinking alone for long enough that sitting in a room thinking with other people present was the appropriate next thing. Renner had the semifinals bracket information and was explaining to Lauren why the statistical improbability of a general track first year in the semifinals was more significant than the semifinals match itself. Lauren was listening with the attentive patience of someone who was not certain he agreed, but was willing to wait for the argument to complete before deciding. Sova was reading. Cass was at the other end of the table doing something with her compound preparation containers. He sat down. Renner immediately said, the bracket, as though the word were a complete sentence. Yes, Kael said. Voss, Renner said. Still as though it were a complete sentence. Yes. Renner looked at him for a moment with the expression of someone who had 2 analytical modes, mathematical and social, and was uncertain which mode was appropriate. He settled on, the match is probably going to be interesting. Kael considered whether this was the word he would have used. Probably, he said. Renner accepted this and returned to his explanation to Lauren. Sova looked up briefly from her reading, met his eyes for approximately 1 second in the way that meant she had an accurate reading of the situation and was not going to ask about it, and returned to her text. Cass put a small folded cloth at the corner of the table nearest to him without comment. He opened it later. It was the same dried ginger root she had left him in October. Useful for the specific headache that came from hours of concentrated decision-making in insufficient light. He ate dinner. He went to sleep at the appropriate hour. In the morning, the tournament's semifinals would begin. The semifinals were held in the main arena. The main arena had 200 seats. The seat count on the morning of the semifinals was approximately 180, which was the highest attendance figure the standard bracket had produced. The other semifinal, the first match of the morning, Walcroft versus the second-ranked upper-tier Aura track student, had drawn most of the audience. Walcroft won in 12 minutes and left the crowd with the specific appetite of people who had seen something good and wanted to see what came after it. What came after it was him against Seraphine Voss. He stood at the east entry of the main arena and ran the final calibration. Spatial sense, passive, mid-range, sufficient to register her positioning up to 20 meters without drawing on the active deployment that would be legible at tournament bracket observation distances. Aura output, up from the fractured core baseline to approximately 70 of his actual capacity, which was still significantly below silver but was no longer the minimal emission of the official profile. Physical response, fully available. He was not slowing anything. He was not managing the footwork to a lower register. He was going to move at the speed his body knew how to move. He had been holding everything at a fraction for 3 months. He walked onto the field. She was already at the center. She looked at him across the field with the neutral attention that he had been watching for 2.5 months and that he now understood, in the close range of direct engagement, carried a different weight than it did across a dining hall. She had assessed him before he reached the starting position. The presiding student called the match. She did not wait. Her first combination was faster than anything she had shown in the preliminary rounds. He registered this immediately. She had also been calibrating below her capacity in the preliminary matches, running the minimum required output against insufficient opponents, and had brought the full range of her capability to this match. The first combination was not at preliminary round speed. It was at the speed of what she actually was. He avoided it by reading it before it launched and being elsewhere when it arrived. Not the footwork register. Not the trained instinct register. The spatial sense register. He knew where the combination was aimed at the moment her weight shifted for the launch, and he used that knowledge at the speed it was available to him. She registered his absence from the position and adjusted. The second combination was aimed at where he would predictably move after avoiding the first. It was correctly aimed. He was not there either. In the stands, someone made a sound. The match's first phase ran for 2 minutes and 27 seconds, 12 exchanges, both of them present in a way that neither had been in their earlier tournament matches. He hit her twice in that period, both at the aura structure's integration points, where his preparatory period observation had identified architectural thinness. She hit him 3 times, all on valid scoring points. He allowed 2 of them through deliberate calibration errors, and the third arrived before he had completed the position adjustment, which was a genuine miss. The genuine miss told him the match was running at a level where genuine misses were possible, which was the level he had planned for and which required acknowledgement. She called the Voss Radiance for the first time at the 2-minute 27 mark. He saw the spatial prepositioning begin. She established the geometry 4 seconds before the technique executed, longer than her preliminary matches, which had used 2 seconds. She was accounting for his spatial reading. She was placing the geometry in a position that assumed he would read a 2-second prepositioning and move accordingly. The 4-second version placed the endpoint of the strike in the location that his 2-second reading response would produce. He did not use his 2-second response. He moved at the 4-second mark, which was before the prepositioning was complete, to a position outside the endpoint range that the 4-second geometry was establishing. He moved at the speed his spatial sense made available to him, which was faster than the speed of someone reading an opponent's body for a launch indicator and reacting to what the body showed. The Voss Radiance struck the position he had vacated 0.2 of a second earlier. She absorbed the outcome and looked at him. He was standing 7 meters from his starting position. He had moved 7 meters in the time it had taken the Radiance to complete its execution. Without apparent intermediate motion of the conventional kind, the spatial sense had given him the endpoint and his body had closed the distance using the body's own momentum redirected in a way that was faster than a standard footwork sequence because it didn't require recalculating the path, only committing to the direction. He did not look like he had used space magic. He looked like someone who had moved very fast. But she had space. She had space as a secondary affinity, and she had been training with it for 2 years, and she had watched, from the Advanced Arena Observation Section South Side, his quarterfinal match against Nira fell that afternoon. He watched her assess what had just happened. The second phase was 40 seconds. He would remember it in that block of time afterward, not as exchanges, not as a sequence of individual moments, but as 40 seconds of continuous present tense pressure that required his full available attention at all points simultaneously. She was running him. Not running a match, running him specifically, because the first Voss Radiance's failure had given her information she was now using. She knew he could read the prepositioning. She was trying to make that reading insufficient, combinations that forced him to commit before the prepositioning established its final geometry, spatial angles designed to close the range faster than he could clear it. 3 feints in the first 20 seconds that each established the beginning of a Voss Radiance prepositioning and then aborted before completion, making him spend his spatial senses' attention on monitoring the feint rather than on his own positioning. He spent 20 seconds maintaining his position and spending information. She spent 20 seconds collecting it. At the 20-second mark, she had enough. She launched the second Voss Radiance. The prepositioning was different from the first. She had placed the geometry in 4 simultaneous points, not 1, with each point covering a different vector of departure from his current position. A geometry designed for an opponent who moved at the speed and spatial precision she had now observed him moving at. He looked at the 4-point geometry. He looked at the gap between the second and fourth points, which was 0.6 seconds wide. He moved through it. Not at the speed that the word moved usually implied. The spatial sense had the endpoint, and he committed to the endpoint from within the geometry rather than from outside it, compressing the transition through the gap in the time available. The technique was not named, had no practice arena description, and was not something he had trained formally. It was what happened when a spatial sense that was native to his core met a body that Gareth had trained for 3 years to commit to direction without hesitation. He cleared the second Voss Radiance with 0.15 seconds to spare on the gap. He was in the wrong position to counter. He had spent all available attention on the transit and had no remaining capacity for the follow-up action. He completed the transit and found himself at 9 meters from where he had been, with a clear line to Seraphine and no energy for the strike. He stood. The arena was not making noise. He was aware, in his peripheral processing, that the arena was not making noise. She looked at him across the 9 meters. She placed the third Voss Radiance without a setup. No feints, no prepositioning interval, no 4-second geometry. She placed it where he was standing at the moment she decided to place it, which was different from where he had been standing 0.15 seconds earlier. And she placed it faster than the technique had been described as executing in any of the textual references he had read. She hit him. He was aware of the arena's noise after the fact. The non-lethality protocols had handled the impact correctly. The aura field disruption registered as a match point and engaged the safety termination. He had gone down on one knee from the momentum. He came back up as the presiding student called the match, and he inclined his head to Seraphine, who returned it. He heard the crowd. General track first year, he heard, from somewhere in the middle section. Silver aura, advanced track, 3-1, but that second, and then the crowd was too many voices at once. He heard, distinctly, from the front row. Where did he learn that? He went to the preparation room. He sat in the preparation room and ran the assessment. At 70 capability, in the semifinals of the Academy's year-end tournament, he had forced Seraphine Voss to use the Voss Radiance 3 times in a single match. The preliminary data suggested she had never needed more than 2 in any match this season. He had avoided both the first and second Voss Radiance manifestations before being caught by the third. The crowd had seen exceptional speed, extraordinary spatial instinct, and one moment, the second Radiance avoidance. That was reading, in the conversations beginning to move through the seats, as impossible footwork, or something I didn't follow, or I have no idea how he did that. What Seraphine had seen, the same moment at the resolution of someone with space affinity, watching someone else use space affinity. She had the vocabulary for what the transit through the 0.6 second gap had looked like from 3 meters away. The crowd didn't have that vocabulary. She did. He had known this would happen when he wrote 70. The alternative is not acceptable in his cipher notebook the previous evening. He opened his notebook to a new page and wrote, match complete. Outcome, loss, 3-1. Secondary outcome, Seraphine Voss has space affinity and was at close range during the second Voss Radiance avoidance. She saw it. I knew she would. This was the choice. He put the pen down. Outside, the arena noise was settling into the specific register of a crowd that had finished watching something and was now discussing it. He could hear, faintly, the specific quality of discussion that came after an outcome people had not expected, even if the outcome itself, the loss, had been what the bracket predicted. The tournament's final was tomorrow. He was not in it. He picked up the notebook, placed the pen back in its case, and went to the dining hall for the evening meal. The tournament final was the following afternoon. He watched it from the second row of the main arena's north observation section, where the angle was good and the crowd's attention was on the field. Seraphine and Walcroft. The match lasted 6 minutes and 14 seconds, which was significantly longer than any of her previous matches and was, by any standard applied to the current Academy's tournament history, an exceptional match to watch. Walcroft was good. He had the right side over-rotation flaw that Kael had identified in the preparation period, and he knew he had it, and he managed it with the discipline of someone who had been working on it for long enough that the correction was almost automatic. He was patient, conservative, and significantly better than the students she had faced in the preliminary rounds. She used the Voss Radiance 3 times. The first 2 were redirected. Walcroft was an experienced enough opponent that he could partially compensate for the spatial prepositioning, and the first 2 Radiance strikes caught him, but did not collapse his field. The third collapsed it. She won. The crowd's response to her win was different from the crowd's response to his loss the previous day. His loss had produced a specific quality of conversation that was still running through the Academy's social environment this morning, a combination of post-match analysis and recategorization of what he had shown. Her win produced a specific quality of recognition. The audience that had already understood that she would win here was giving the formal acknowledgement to what they had already known. Not surprise, relief of a kind. The correct outcome had arrived. At the award ceremony, she stood in the tournament's winner position with the ceremony's formality arranged around her, the presiding dean, the faculty committee, the formal acknowledgement of both tracks' champion status. She accepted the recognition with the composure she brought to everything. Her expression did not change. She did not appear to be anything except exactly what she appeared to be. He left before the ceremony completed. The note was in his residential tower postbox at the 7th hour. A card, house boss letterhead, the compact exact hand he recognized. 2 words. My study. Below that. Now. No pleasantries. No formal language. No tea. He folded the card and placed it in his pocket and went. He used the walk to her study to run his options. She had seen space magic in the match. He had confirmed this as a calculated certainty when he made the decision to run at 70. She was not the kind of person who filed away, "I saw something I cannot explain," without investigating it. She was the kind of person who had spent 2 weeks analyzing an administrative aftermath record to understand who had protected 2 students she didn't know. She was going to this confrontation with a question she already believed she knew the answer to, and she was going to ask it directly, and she was going to see what he did with it. His options arranged themselves as a list. Option 1, deny. Claim the avoidance was exceptional footwork, trained instinct, something that read like space magic to someone who didn't know what else it could be. This was implausible, and she was too smart to accept it, and he was too organized to let an implausible claim stand in a relationship he had been building with careful precision since September. Option 2, deflect. Give her something adjacent to the truth. Acknowledge the unusual core development. Frame the spatial instinct as an atypical side effect of the fractured structure. Maintain the cover's existing architecture. This was potentially survivable. She might accept a version of it that was detailed enough to seem credible. Option 3, a version of the truth. He arrived at her door and knocked. She opened it herself. Her study was a room he had never been in. Small, organized, the specific order of a person who had decided where every object lived and maintained that decision consistently. No tea service visible. She had not set one out. She stepped back from the door. He entered. The door closed. She looked at him. You used space magic in the match, she said. Explain. He considered his options for approximately 1 second. My affinity is undeclared, he said. Declaring it would make me a target. She looked at him with an expression he had not seen before on her face. Not the neutral attention. Not the almost smile. Something that was the direct opposite of the neutral attention, a focused precision that had dropped the layer of managed expression and was simply registering what it was finding. The fractured core is a lie, she said. The core is unusual, he said. Not defective. She was quiet for a moment. The specific quality of quiet that was not the absence of a response, but the organization of one. Those are not the same thing, she said. No, he said. They're not. She absorbed this. He could see her doing it, not the external signal of absorption, which she controlled, but the internal signal that the external control could not fully manage. A stillness in her eyes that was the stillness of someone whose processing was faster than their visible response. She was arriving somewhere in her understanding of what he had just said, and she was arriving quickly, and the destination was not comfortable. An undeclared space affinity in a student with a declared fractured core, she said. Not a question. She was stating the structure of it. Yes, at a level sufficient to avoid the second Voss radiance. At a level that was available in the match, yes. She looked at him with the specific quality of someone who has found the answer to a question and found that the answer generates 3 more questions of significantly greater weight. The fractured core assessment, she said. How long? He understood the question. How long had he been carrying a declared fractured core with an undeclared space affinity? Since the assessment ceremony, he said. I was 8. She was quiet for a longer time than before. He did not fill the quiet. It was not his to fill. You've been at this academy for 3 months, she said, with a space affinity undeclared and a fractured core on your record, and you've been competing in the tournament at a level that she stopped. She restarted. At the second radiance. That wasn't spatial instinct. No, that was space magic. Yes. She looked at him with an expression that he could not read into a single word. Not anger, which he had expected. Not calculation, which he had also expected. Something that was closer to the expression she had when the trade history conversation had been genuinely interesting and the monitoring had receded, except sharper and less comfortable and pointed directly at him rather than at an interesting argument. The fractured core is a lie, she said again. The same sentence, delivered differently, not a conclusion this time, but something else. The specific quality of saying something aloud that you have known for 10 seconds, but need to hear as a sound in order to file it correctly. The core is unusual, he said again. The same words. They were the accurate words. She turned away from him. Not with the composure that was a decision, with the composure that was the default and was insufficient for whatever she was doing with her back to him. She walked to the window that looked out over the academy's western wall and stood there for a moment. He waited. She turned back. Sit down, she said. He sat. She did not sit. She stood at the window with her arms at her sides, which was the least managed posture he had seen her in, and she looked at him with the expression that was not one thing he had a word for. Tell me, she said, why you are telling me this. He said, because you asked. And because you already knew. She considered this. Those aren't the same reasons, she said. No, he said. They're not. She sat down across from him. Not with the composed deliberateness she had sat with at the tea table. She sat like someone who had been standing for an hour and had decided to stop. Start from the beginning, she said. Tell me what you actually are. He told her. Not everything. A version of the truth with the true shape and some of the true content and the specific omissions that were not yet available to share with anyone, because the specific omissions were the load-bearing elements of the entire structure. He told her the version that was accurate about the political dimension and silent about what lay beneath it. A declared defective core in a minor frontier barony, he said. That's a child who disappears from the kingdom's attention. No noble house watches him. No faction places him in their calculations. No one monitors his household's correspondence, his staff, his father's administrative decisions. He becomes the background of the document, present in the record, invisible in the reading. She listened with the quality of someone who was absorbing and not yet responding. A declared space affinity in a minor frontier barony, he continued, is the opposite. Space is rare enough and significant enough that an undeclared space practitioner in a border region becomes immediately relevant to parties who watch for capabilities they can use or capabilities they need to control. The Crown Prince's faction alone has 3 students who have been placed at this academy through scholarship structures that originated from a specific interest in their capabilities rather than their academic merit. She said nothing. I was 8 years old, he said. The assessment ceremony was a traveling assessor with a standard detection kit and no particular interest in being thorough. What he found was unusual enough that he wrote fractured structure and moved on. I did not correct him. She was still. You've been building this since you were 8, she said. I've been aware of the situation since I was 8, he said. Building implies a coherent plan from the beginning. The plan developed as I understood the situation better. And what is the situation currently? He considered this. The situation, he said, is that I am a first-year general track student with an unusual core development and at least one undeclared affinity, who has spent 6 years making sure that neither of those things is legible to anyone who would use them as a tool before I have determined that they will use them as a tool I want used. She looked at him across the small study table. The lamp was the only light. It was evening and the window's fading gray had reached the point where the room was lit by the lamp alone. You knew, she said slowly, what you were doing in that courtyard during the Seld incident. You understood the mechanism in 3 days. Yes. You knew what I was doing in the library after. Within approximately 40 minutes of reading your note. The expression that was not one thing he had a word for appeared again in her face. It had a new register, something that was related to the expression she wore when a trade history argument had been more interesting than expected. But the content was different. This expression was not about an interesting argument. It was about the understanding of a specific experience, someone who had been having a conversation in which the other person knew the shape of the conversation more precisely than she had known. The tea, she said. You were probing for Crown Prince faction affiliation, he said. The 3 indirect approaches were placing the faction as an analytical object to see how I oriented toward it, embedding the House Voss land dispute in the regional question to see whether I knew the history in a way that suggested investment in its outcome, and the intelligence network comment, which was specific enough to be a test rather than small talk. She was quiet for a moment. You answered all 3 in ways that were informative about capability and uninformative about purpose and service. Yes. She absorbed this. He waited. She had been sitting since approximately the 3rd minute of this conversation, in the posture that was her least managed, the posture of someone who had been standing and had decided to stop. She had not moved from it. He noted this because it was different from every prior interaction they had had, in which her physical arrangement was always deliberate. Every interaction, she said. Not to him exactly. To the understanding she was building. The observation in September, the library corridor. You didn't see me in the library corridor, he said. I moved aside. You passed at 6 feet. She looked at him. I know, she said. I know you were there. A pause. I registered your aura signature at 12 feet. I knew you were in the corridor. I didn't look at you. He filed this. He had spent 2.5 months believing she hadn't seen him in the library corridor. He had written in his cipher at the end of CH60's evening, she had not seen him. This was exactly what he needed. She had seen him. She had known he was there, had known his aura signature from 2 months of passive proximity registration, and had walked past him without looking at him in a way that he had read as not seeing when it had in fact been a deliberate choice of where to direct her attention. He sat with this for a moment. You let me believe you hadn't noticed, he said. Yes, she said. Why? The same reason you let me believe the fractured core was real, she said. Because what someone believes you know about them is information about what they will do next. He thought about this. We've been doing the same thing, he said. Not quite the same thing. She looked at him with an expression that was, he realized, the same expression as the almost smile, but underneath the smile rather than adjacent to it, which was an entirely different register. You were much more thorough. He had nothing to add to this that was accurate. It was accurate. She stood. She moved to the study's small shelf and stood looking at it for a moment, not picking anything up. I have been at this academy for 2.5 years, she said, and I have not shared a complete political analysis with any person in it. Not my aide. Not the 3 students I have worked with on research inquiries. Not the faculty member I would describe as the closest thing to an advisor I have. She paused. I don't share it because I have not found anyone who understands politics at the level that makes sharing it worthwhile rather than exposing. He waited. The courtyard, she said. The celled mechanism. You read a 3-level operation in 3 days and identified a third-order consequence I had not accounted for. Then you closed it without anyone knowing you had done it. She turned from the shelf and looked at him. You were not protecting your study group. You were protecting them because you wanted to and also because you understood that it would matter to me, eventually, that you had. And you closed it in a way that would produce exactly this conversation when I found it because you knew I would find it. He considered whether to confirm this. I didn't know this conversation would happen in December of this year, he said. I knew a version of it would happen. How long? Since September. She looked at him with the full weight of 2.5 years of political assessment retrained on a specific target and finding that the target had been thinking about the same calibration from a different angle since before the assessment began. You're 14, she said. Yes. And you have been operating at this level since you were? Since approximately 10, he said. The prior 2 years were less organized. She sat back down. Not the deliberate chair pull of someone who had decided where to sit. She sat down because standing was no longer necessary, and she had stopped needing to manage the decision. You came here with a plan, she said. I came here because the academy was the next necessary step in the plan. Yes. And the plan, she stopped. She was looking at something inside the question rather than at the question itself. The plan doesn't end here. No. How long? He looked at her. How long does the plan extend, or how long until the relevant outcomes? Both. He said, the plan extends as far as I can see. The relevant outcomes are specific and have timelines that I am still revising. She received this. You understand, she said, that I now have information about your capabilities that is a significant liability to your position if I use it. Yes, he said. And you told me anyway. You asked. And you already had the piece that would have let you reach this point without my confirmation. He paused. And if I had lied and you had determined that I had lied, you would have had the same information plus the knowledge that I would lie to you when pressed. That outcome was worse than this one. She looked at him for a long time. You calculated that telling me was strategically superior to not telling me, she said. Yes, he said. I also told you because you asked, and the question was a fair one given what you had seen. She absorbed the distinction between these two reasons without comment. He had offered both. The first was strategic, the second was something else. He was not going to clarify which he had meant to emphasize. Leave, she said. I need to think. He stood. He placed the chair precisely as he had found it. He went to the door. He paused with his hand on the door. The T, he said, without turning. Your reading of the pre-fragmentation trade documentation. The section on the Thorn Hall Assembly's post-crisis administrative reorganization. Your reading was more complete than mine in 2 specific places. A pause. I know, she said, from the center of the room. I've had access to materials you haven't. I know, he said. I'm going to find them. He opened the door and left. In the corridor, he walked back toward the residential tower in the December dark and noted, in the specific register he reserved for things that required careful recording, every interaction since September, which he had been processing from the position of someone who had not been seen in a library corridor, now required revision. He had been calculating from an incorrect starting premise. The revision was significant. He would revise it. He had the rest of the evening.